Welcome back, my dear students, to yet another lecture on the history of English language and literature. And this will be most probably the last lecture on the syllabus prescribed for the third semester students of English language and literature of Kerala University. And in this last lecture, we shall see something about the contemporary life in England. So this is our last lecture on the history of English language and literature. Syllabus prescribed for semester 3 Kerala University. So contemporary life in England. Now we have learned about Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative Party that ruled England. Conservative Party and Margaret Thatcher. Thatcher was the Prime Minister of England from 1979 to 1990. Now John Major became the leader of the Conservative Party and the Prime Minister in 1990 when Margaret Thatcher would leave the office. He continued in office till 1997, so 1990 to 1997. The Conservative Party will lose the elections in 1997. It was the worst defeat of the party in 150 years. And John Major resigned as the head of the Conservative Party, and William Hague became the leader of the Conservative Party, and he was the head of the party from 1997 to 2001. He resigned in 2001 as the party once again was defeated in the elections. Ian Smith became the leader of the party but stepped down since he lost to a vote of no confidence. Michael Howard became the leader in 2003, but he also resigned in 2005. So that is something regarding the Conservative Party. The Labour Party came to power under the leadership of Tony Blair in 1997 when the Conservative Party led by John Major was defeated. Now Tony Blair, he was an influential leader and his government enjoyed a lot of public popularity. Tony Blair, he continued the liberal economic policy of Margaret Thatcher. Tony Blair supported American foreign policy and he actively participated in the 2001 invasion of Afghanistan and the attack of Iraq in 2003. Now Tony Blair, he holds the record of being the Labour Party's longest serving Prime Minister. Tony Blair, he led the party to 3 consecutive victories in the general elections of 1997, 2001 and 2005. All these 3 elections the Conservative Party will lose. Now Tony Blair was a leader of the Labour Party from 1994 to 2007 and the British Prime Minister from 1997 to 2007. Now Tony Blair, he has been criticized very much for his alliance with the US President George Bush and his policies in the Middle East. Now he supported Bush in his war against Iraq, Israel-Lebanon conflict and Israel-Palestine conflict. Tony Blair justified the military action against Iraq and is criticized for exaggerating Iraq's possession of weapons for mass destruction. So he was a very popular, influential leader. At the same time, he was criticized for his alliance with the US and the George Bush. Tony Blair, he resigned in July 2007 and he was succeeded by Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown as a leader of the Labour Party and as the Prime Minister of England. But the popularity of the Labour Party declined and they lost the elections in 2010. Now the Conservative Party was back to power in England in 2010 or with the 2010 elections, and David Cameron became the Prime Minister in 2010. Now David Cameron was the leader of the Conservative Party since 2005. Now David Cameron was the UK Prime Minister till July 2016. David Cameron. After David Cameron, Theresa May, a member of the Conservative Party, will become the Prime Minister of UK, Prime Minister of England. Now Theresa May, she was the Prime Minister from 2016 to 2019. The present Prime Minister, the incumbent Prime Minister, is Boris Johnson, and he is also a member of the Conservative Party and is the Prime Minister from July 2019. So Boris Johnson is the present Prime Minister of UK. We shall say something about Scottish independence. Scottish independence. Now, Scottish independence is the political movement for Scotland to become a sovereign state that is independent from the United Kingdom. Scottish independence. Now, Scotland was, as we have learned previously, Scotland was an independent kingdom through the Middle Ages. But in 1603, the two kingdoms of England and Scotland was joined together under the monarch King James VI of Scotland. King James VI of Scotland is also the King James I of England. The two kingdoms were united politically in 1707. Now we see a campaign for a Scottish self-government which began in the 19th century. A campaign for a Scottish self-government. Two referendums on devolution were held in 1979 and 1997 with a devolved Scottish Parliament being established on 1st of July 1999. What is devolved? What is devolution? Devolution is the Parliament of UK statutory granting of a greater level of self-government to the Scottish Parliament. Greatest level of self-government to the Scottish Parliament. A statute, a statute is a written enactment. So, devolution. Now we shall say something about the Scottish National Party. The Scottish National Party became the governing party of the devolved Parliament in 2007. Devolved means with a greater self-government. And the party won the majority of seats at the 2011 Scottish Parliament election. Now, the party won the election. Now, this will lead to the agreement between the Scottish and the UK government to hold the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. 2014 Scottish independence referendum. What is this Scottish independence referendum of 2014? A referendum is a universal vote. A referendum is a universal vote in which the entire electorate is invited to vote on a particular proposal. So, referendum. So, voting for a particular proposal. What is the proposal? The referendum question was, should Scotland be an independent country? Should Scotland be an independent country? 44.7 voted yes and 55.3 voted no. So, they did not become a sovereign independent country. Now, what is Brexit? We have heard about Brexit. Brexit is the blend of Britain and exit. Brexit. Now, it is the withdrawal of UK from the European Union and the European Atomic Energy Community on 31st January 2020. Now, in the Brexit vote of June 2013, 62% of Scottish voters voted to remain, but 39% voted to leave the European Union. We shall also say something about the Church of England. We have learned how the Church of England was conceived during the Reformation period, how it came about. King Henry VIII, he broke away from the Catholic Church since his request for divorce was not heeded to by Rome. He founded the Church of England, and the Church of England was established by Queen Elizabeth through her Anglican settlement. So the Church of, we know how the Church of England came about. Now the Church of England is still a symbol of religious and political authority. The monarch of England is still the supreme governor of the church. The monarch of England is still the supreme governor of the church. The coronation ceremonies are conducted by the church. The crown is placed on the head of the new monarch by the Archbishop of Canterbury. So the Church of England is still holding a place in England. But the Church of England declined or drifted to the margins of the society by the end of the 19th century. The church attendance became low. The church attendance declined. The people who attend the church became low. The number of Roman Catholics in the country began to increase. So the number of people attending the Roman Catholic Church increased. And there are more Roman Catholics than Anglicans in UK today. The United Kingdom consists of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and Scotland is primarily Presbyterian, Wales is non-conformist and Northern Ireland is mostly Roman Catholic. A general observation that that we can remember about the faith of people is that most people have continued to believe in God and have frequented the church even in times of crisis, even in times of difficulties. So that is something regarding the Church of England. We shall also say something about the colony of Hong Kong. It was the colony of Britain. Hong Kong was a colony of Britain, and Britain yielded Hong Kong to China on the night of 30th June 1997. Now, the important factor about this handover is that it is a handover from a capitalist country to a communist country, and it was done quite smoothly. The then Chinese president Jiang Zemin, he allowed Hong Kong to develop its democratic system, and Hong Kong could retain its local currency, the Hong Kong dollar. So that is handing over Hong Kong from Britain to China, a smooth transfer from a capitalist country to a socialist country. We also have heard about Prince Charles and Princess Diana. We learned that the wedding of Prince Charles and Princess Diana was the greatest social event in England in the 1980s. Almost 750 million people watched the event on television. The couple divorced in August 1996, and Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris on 31st August 1997. Now, Charles married Camilla Parker Bowles in April 2005. Camilla was a divorcee, and her former husband was still alive. That is Prince Charles and Princess Diana. We shall say something about Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II was born on 21st April 1926 in London. Her parents were King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. Her father died in 1952. Now she was crowned, Queen Elizabeth II was crowned in 1953. Now she is the longest lived and longest reigning monarch of England, the longest lived and longest reigning monarch of Britain. She is the longest serving female head of state in the world history, and is the world's oldest living monarch, longest reigning current monarch, and oldest and longest serving current head of state. She celebrated her 65 years on the throne in February 2017 with her Sapphire Jubilee. Let's also say something about the spread of English language. The spread of English language. One result of imperialism was the spread of the English language. Many English writers have emerged from the former colonies of England. Some Indian writers in English, as we know, are R.K. Narayan, Raja Rao, Salman Rushdie, Vikram Seth, etc. The Indian authors have won Booker Prizes. The Indian authors who have won the Booker Prize are V.S. Naipaul in 1971 for his work in a Free State, Salman Rushdie in 1981 for Midnight Children, Arundhati Roy in 1997 for The God of Small Things, Kiran Desai in 2006 for The Inheritance of Laws, and Aravind Adiga in 2008 for The White Tiger. What about the England today? England today is a home. It's a home to several people belonging to different races and cultures. There is increased ethnic diversity. People from different parts of the world, people from different ethnic backgrounds are living in England. There are several minority groups from Asia, minority groups from Africa, especially in London. So it is a haven of people from different parts of the world, from different colonies of past colonies of England. What about the English literature? The English literature has widened its range and scope. The Welsh, Scottish and Irish writings from the days of yore have been included as part of English literature. From the days of yore means from the past days or from the bygone days. And the post-colonial literature is also part of English literature today. Post-colonial literature. Post-colonial literature is the literature from the former colonies of Britain. Here the native writers, the writers from the colonies, The native writers used the language of the colonizer to give expression to their colonial experience and their indigenous culture. And also, we see multiculturalism in English life and literature. Multiculturalism is an important aspect of English life and literature today. People from the former colonies have settled down in England, making it a land of different cultures. And there are people from multiple cultures reside in England, and English literature has become more multicultural. Thus today we can see that in the postmodern literature there is no single English literature. There are literatures in English. There is no single English literature today. There are literatures in English. We shall also mention about the new trends in English theatre. What are some of the new trends in English theatre? When we discuss the new trends in English theatre, we shall mention about the political plays or the proletarian drama, the in-your-face drama, and the epic theatre, and also we shall have a short mention about literature and new media. So what is this political plays or proletarian drama? A political theatre or proletarian drama can be defined as a theatre of the people, a theatre by the people, or theatre for the people, of, by and for the people. Often political theatre has been used to promote specific political theories or specific political ideals. Now Marxist theatre, feminist theatre, Brechtian theatre are examples of political theatre. Now political theatre has developed within the civil societies under oppressive governments as a means of actual underground communication and the spreading of critical thought. So that is something regarding the political or the proletarian drama. What is in-your-face drama? In-your-face drama. In-your-face theatre is a style and sensibility of drama that emerged in Great Britain in the 1990s. The term in-your-face, it was coined by Alex Sears. In-your-face British drama today. That is a book he has written. So in his book In-Your-Face British Drama Today, written by Alex Sears in 2001, the term was used by him to describe the works of the young playwrights. The works of the young playwrights, the playwrights who wrote plays in the late 90s or in the early part of the 21st century. Now what is the meaning? What is the meaning of the phrase in your face? The meaning of the phrase in your face is defined as something blatantly aggressive or provocative, impossible to ignore or avoid. So something that is blatantly aggressive or provocative, that is impossible to avoid. The playwrights of this style breaks the conventional codes of theatre, and what they do, they present the vulgar, they present the shocking and aggressive materials on stage. In-your-face theatre shocks audience by the extremisms of its language, by the extremisms of its images, unsettles the audience by their emotional frankness, and disturbs the audience by its acute questioning of moral norms. These plays are meant to shock and surprise and disturb the audience. In-your-face drama. Now this plays will affect the audience and will arouse the consciousness of the public, consciousness in the public. Now in-your-face theatre is the kind of theatre which grabs the audience by the scruff of the neck and shakes it until it gets the message. So grabs the audience by the neck, shakes it until the audience gets the message. Now most in-your-face plays are experimental. They want the audiences to feel the extreme emotions that are being shown on the stage. In your face theatre, it is an experimental theatre. In your face play, they are experimental in nature. The language is very filthy. There is nudity. People have sex in front of the audience. There is violence on the stage. One character humiliates another character. All the taboos are broken. Unmentionable subjects are broached. Conventional dramatic structures are all subverted. So it will shock the audience, it will disturb the audience. Some of the practitioners of this in-your-face theatre are Sarah Kane, Mark Ravenhill, and Anthony Nielsen. Now there is some of the works of Sarah Kane are Blasted, Phaedrus Love, Cleansed, Grave and Psychosis, etc. There is so much of violence in the plays of Sarah Kane. Similarly, there is Mark Ravenhill. Some of his works are some explicit Polaroids, or the cut, or the cane that came in 2018, etc. There is Anthony Nielsen. Is a Scottish playwright and one of the leading playwrights of in-your-face theatre. Anthony Nielsen. His dominant themes are sex and violence. His most important play is Normal Dusseldorf Ripper. Normal Dusseldorf Ripper. Other plays are The Wonderful World of Dissociation, Realism, etc. That is something regarding in-your-face theatre. Let's also have a mention about epic theatre. What is epic theatre? Epic theatre is a theatrical movement that arose in the early to mid 20th century. It is a kind of political theatre which presents the contemporary political issues. It is also called the didactic theatre, epic theatre or the didactic theatre. Didactic theatre means it will teach you something. The epic theatre will help the audience to see their world as it is. Now, what is the aim? The aim of the epic theatre is not to keep the audience in an illusion, but to present the real world as it is and to help them make judgments on them. So, it is didactic. It will help you. It will teach you something. The term epic theatre was coined by Erwin Piscator. His aim was to encourage playwrights to address issues related to contemporary existence. So, to address the issues of the times. The epic theatre emphasizes the audience perspective and the audience reaction. It helps the audience to get engaged in the play in different ways. So, that is epic theatre. Now, some of the characteristics of epic theatre we can remember while we learn the epic theatre. It may be possible that they ask you some of the characteristics of the epic theatre. The first characteristic of epic theatre is that the purpose of epic theatre is didactic. It is a didactic drama presenting a series of loosely connected scenes, and it avoids all kinds of illusion. It often interprets the storyline to address the audience directly. It will address the audience directly with the analysis, the argument or documentation. So, the first primary purpose of epic theatre is didactic. Secondly, alienation effect is another characteristic. What is alienation effect? Alienation effect is a technique used to distance the audience from the emotional involvement of the play. So, you are not invited to emotionally involve in the play. In the play you will have constant reminders to the audience of the artificiality of the theatrical performance. Don't get emotionally involved in the play. It will bring about an intellectual response to the drama in the audience, not an emotional involvement but an intellectual response, reflection in the audience. Next characteristic that we can remember is the epic theatre tries to expose the hidden agenda behind the realism that the drama tries to present. There are behind the presentation there are some hidden agendas. The realism presented in the drama is dishonest. It is done to make the audience to accept the reality shown on the drama to be true, but it is not true. Thus, in an epic theatre, the audience should see what is happening behind the scenes. The audience should construct their own interpretation, not merely accept what is presented on the screen, what is presented on the stage. They must have their own interpretations. The next characteristic is that the music or the songs in the play, it is used to comment on the action. It is not used to add mood to the scene, but it is used to comment. The audience is kept critical of the play's heroes, etc. The next characteristic to remember about epic theatre is that the lighting used in the epic theatre is the open white lighting. The colored lighting will evoke emotional impact on in the play. So, only the white lighting is used. The next characteristic about epic theatre is that the scenes are loosely connected in the epic theatre. The scenes are loosely connected. There are flashbacks, there are flash forwards, there are jumps between the episodes, etc. The scenes are loosely connected. Some of the important practitioners of epic theatre are Bertolt Brecht. Bertolt Brecht, the major practitioner of this epic theatre is this particular person, Bertolt Brecht. The epic theatre was a form developed by Bertolt Brecht. It was popularized by him. In a short organum for the theatre, he discusses about the epic theatre itself. He wants the audience to think and discuss about what they are watching. That Bertolt Brecht. Another person is Erwin Piscator. There is also Vladimir Mayakovsky. What about the literature and new media in contemporary England? Literature and new media. So what is new media? New media is any media that is delivered digitally. We are living during the time of this new media. Any media that is delivered digitally. It can be a newspaper article or blogs or music or podcasts. Any internet related communication can be called as new media, and we are living in a world of new media. They are consumed on the cell phones, laptops, desktops and tablets, and they often contain the same information as the traditional media. So the new media is delivered to the audience using the new platform, the internet. So my dear students, we are coming to the end of our syllabus. We have talked about the contemporary England. We have talked about the new trends in the literature, new trends in the drama, etc. I hope you have understood the different themes that we have discussed in our syllabus. I hope all of you have gone through all the lectures, and I'm sure that the notes that will be provided to you immediately will be helpful to you. Please go through all the notes and please make a serious study of all the themes that we have discussed. We are facing the pandemic, COVID-19, and in this semester all our classes were in the online mode. Online mode is used by people all over the world for education today. So my dear students, please make use of this new media, the digital platform for your learning, and please prepare well for examinations. Even though we may not have any regular offline classes immediately, your examinations will be conducted as normally when this pandemic subsides. So please don't waste your time. Please make use of all our lectures. Please prepare your own notes and study them and get ready for the examination. Thank you for your patient listening to all my lectures. I hope all those lectures were useful to you. Please go through them again and again. And if we get a chance to come to the class, we will have a face-to-face encounter and discussion on the topics we have dealt with. Thank you. Have a nice time. Please stay safe at home.